I never get tired of this theme song. And I feel like I don't mention who it is often enough. This theme song was made years ago, over 4 years ago, by my good buddy Greg Markle, aka The Animals at Night, who recently released some new music, which I'm a big fan of Greg's music. Obviously, I'm using one of his tracks, but he did create it for the show. Anyways, thank you, Greg. I'm going to do a lot of thank yous. This is kind of going to be a sappy, nostalgia-infused episode. Throughout the whole thing, we've got Tony Rolando back for the third time to Podular Modcast to talk about his album, Breakin is a Memory, and I absolutely adore this album, and we're going to get into all sorts of nitty-gritty details about the writing, recording, and philosophy behind it. So, yeah, we're going to do that momentarily. Also, huge thank you to anybody who supports me on Patreon. That is the best way to support the podcast, actually. It's the main way to support the podcast. It is the lifeblood of the podcast. This show literally could not exist without it. So I know I thank you guys regularly, and I just want to do it again and try to write something out, write some drafts that I feel like could actually capture the the gravity of what I actually feel, because I feel like just saying thank you isn't enough, or just saying how much I appreciate it. But yeah, it's very weird, to be honest. It's a strange thing, and it's a hard thing to wrap my head around. But it is so meaningful. You're literally making it so I can do this, and I love doing this so much. Obviously, I've been doing it for over 4 years, and I don't see any end in sight. I want to keep going, but I really can't do it without the Patreon. So thank you. And if you would like to help, you can head over to patreon.com/Podular Modcast. And we're live for episode 200 with Tony Rolando. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I mean, it's pretty cool for me to hit 200, and it's cool to have you as a guest.
That is a lot. That 200 is a big number. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's weird. It feels like when I told my wife the other day, it's like, yeah, it's over 4 years. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah. It just doesn't feel. It's gone by very quickly, but it also feels like I've been doing it forever. So
I know that feeling.
But yeah, I wanted to have you on not just because you're good chat, but this new record you haven't released it quite yet, but the vinyl looks like it's already sold out. So congrats on that.
My copies are, but you can still get it from Important Records.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And then also distributors are going to have it April 29th. So that's the actual physical release date. Some folks have already gotten theirs if they pre-ordered direct from the label, but distributors are still in the process of getting theirs, and I think they'll have them on the shelves on the 29th. Okay. And that's Europe too. So some European folks were asking about that because I know it's so expensive to get one record shipped over to Europe. You pay like the price of the record just to have the record shipped. So if you're interested and you're in Europe, just hold tight. I think Boomcat and Juno are going to have them, and probably some others that I'm not remembering.
Very cool. Juno is the synth shop in the UK, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, I want to definitely dive into this. The last time we talked, it was around Strega release. And I think you had mentioned that, through COVID, you actually started, making a lot more music than you had been in the past because Make Noise kept you so busy. Mm-hmm. So did you make 2 records kind of at the same time and then just break up the songs? Because I was trying to make sense of this when I was looking at your Bandcamp releases.
I had recorded. Yeah, so I had started recording again. It had been over a decade since I had done anything like that. And I recorded like 60 tracks. And you know how it is. Initially, I was very excited about every single one of them. And then, I stepped back for like a couple of months, and then went to listen to them, and it's just, one by one, like trash, 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 trash. And I ended up finding like maybe like 6 that I liked. And I had sent them to some friends, and my friend Robert A. Lowe had suggested putting out a tape, but he said you should make some more music, or find some more that you could put with these to make it more of a longer release. And so I did that, found like 5 or 6 more that I could live with. But then I think he got a little too busy with the soundtracking work that he's doing, which is obviously way more important than releasing, 40 of my cassettes or something. And that kind of got shelved. It still hasn't come out. And so, but all along I kept recording more music, and I made another record, which is this one, Breakin is a Memory. And I was pretty excited about it. So I got it mastered, and I was going to do a self-release, and I sent it out to a bunch of friends again. And it was, I think it must have been a little better than the first one, because like a lot more people kind of got back to me and said, "Hey, I really like this. This is good. Like, how are you doing this? Like, what are you using?" And just got a lot of questions and comments, and it made its way into John over at Important Records hands, and he called me and said, "Hey, I want to put this out. Really like this. It's really great." And the other thing, and this is John speaking, he says, "I've always wanted to release records by people who make instruments. And so this is kind of an exciting opportunity for me." He had dreams of releasing a Buchla record, for example, some of Don Buchla's music, but that hadn't panned out. And so he was kind of excited about this possibility. And then the record just took forever to make, like the actual physical copies, and it was delayed
right now.
Yeah, I'm sure. It was like, oh, there's going to be 3-month delay. Then it was 6. Then it was a year. And so he says, "Hey, maybe you should put together another release, and we'll do it on tape, and it'll come out sooner." And I had already been working on more material. Like, I didn't really stop. I kind of finished the Breakin is a Memory, and then I just kept recording. And so the tape actually is a kind of a collection of, there's a couple of tracks that are kind of outtakes from Breakin is a Memory. And then there's some other tracks that are like a whole other session. And I just kind of sewed them all together into the cassette release. So I guess that's the long story.
You released that cassette, is that a
December?
Year?
Yeah, December 2021. Okay. Yeah. So the idea was, and then the records ended up being a little less delayed than we thought. We were thinking we wouldn't have them until this summer, but they came a little sooner. So that's why the releases are kind of close together. And these days you can't be picky about release dates. You kind of just got to do it when it's going to happen. So it's like, I just remember one day John called and said, "Hey, the records just shut up." I was like, "Wait, what? That's crazy." Okay. I'm not complaining.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. The records that I finished that compilation I did with Mystery Circles that we just released like the pre-order for, that whole record has been done and mastered for 8 months, maybe,
Yeah.
And then we just got an email, "Hey guys, the records might be a little later again." So for like the 4th time. So we already said, "Hey, they're shipping on this date," which we were kind of crossing our fingers about, but yeah, I think everybody understands that's the way it goes.
I agree. That's the cool thing, is I think the folks that are interested in these records, they get it. They're not, they're not going to be like hammering you with emails, demanding refunds, because they know it's out of your control.
Yeah, I ordered something from they're like this, like, I'm trying to think how to describe them. You may have heard them. They're called Neptunian Maximalism.
No, I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, I think they're like a Bulgarian, like, doom orchestra. It's very weird stuff. It's really cool. And think like Earth with Colin Stetson in it or something. But I ordered one of their records, and it took, I think, about 8 months. They, it said it was shipping on X date, and it was even delayed. It's just like, But yeah, everybody knows this story.
For sure. Yes. I mean, speaking of Robert A. Lowe, I ordered his soundtrack, the release. Yeah. I can't remember the label. It looks gorgeous. The cover, the vinyl, everything looks gorgeous. But yeah, I'm still waiting on that. They just sent me another email, hey, be patient. It's going to happen. We promise. So, I mean,
I ordered the same one and got the same emails.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'll get it eventually and I'll be really happy to have it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think, the reason I brought up the Neptunian maximalism thing is like, it was kind of cool. Like the amount of time that had passed, I kind of forgot about it. So when it did show up, it was like, oh, sweet. So that's happened a couple times with vinyl now. So it's like, it's almost like just like a little surprise present that you're not, like
right. Yeah.
Because you have the digital download, once the release is out. So
exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't just move to that model of making the LP more something where it's like, here's the new release, here's the digital download, and if you want your physical, order it. It'll happen when it happens. Because otherwise, artists end up waiting so long. Like we're about to talk about a release that I finished well over a year ago. I can't remember what the dates. I think it might be a year and a half. So
yeah, I think it said you were working on it through written and recorded July, November 2020. So yeah, I know how that. Well, and it's weird because as an artist, I don't know if you probably have a little bit of this, but like, especially with the longer the material has been done to you, like not that I don't want to use like less excitement as a word, but it is kind of like not as it's just less exciting, at least for me, for this thing that we're releasing. All these remixes I did, I really like, but they're so seared into my head and they're so not new, and I'm creating other things that I'm not like, of course I'm excited to tell people about it, but I don't have that like fresh, I just finished, this is my baby feeling.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Maybe that's never really been an option for artists, though, if you think about it. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, Chuck Berry played at this, it's not a state fair. What was it? It was called Lincoln Fest. It was like this festival that happened every year in Central Illinois in Springfield. And, he's playing all the music that you would think Chuck Berry would play. And he's playing it with like, full force energy. Actually, the PA blew out in the middle of his set. Yeah. And he just kept going, just, singing at the top of his lungs, hammering on his guitar. It was like he didn't, he just kept going. And, he has to be sick of the songs by then. That would have been like middle of the 80s or something, 88 or 87 or something, So, but he's still going like full force. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know that musicians ever really get that option to share their art at that like prime moment when they're the most excited about it. They've always got to like prepare it and release it and promote it or bring it to people. And that takes time. It just takes time, whether you're talking about mixing or mastering or touring or distributing, whatever you're doing, it just takes time. So only you get to enjoy that moment and by yourself or with your bandmates. It's fleeting. So while you have it, hang on to it because it's an incredible feeling, and you probably won't have it in 3 or 4 days.
I like that. It's kind of it adds like a little like I don't know. I always go like Tibetan Buddhism when I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, but like kind of a little teaching moment to live in the present. And if you're really enjoying something, don't think about how much you want someone else to enjoy it. Like actually enjoy it yourself. And I wonder too, to bring it back to your record, it's been done for, this long but it's releasing, but as it's out of your hands and in the hands of people making videos and labels writing descriptions and, people mastering it, like you probably aren't listening to it during that phase. So when you get the masters, you get to hear it again for like, the first time or whatever. And then you get to see the video and see the artwork getting finished. And I imagine that, like, has this whole process, seeing it all come together, kind of revitalized that initial like excitement of the tracks?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so the mastering is, yeah, I'm very hands off with mastering. I try to
Mm-hmm.
find somebody who's already mastered or makes music that I really like, which is how I landed with Josh Eustace. His stuff with Telephone Tel Aviv is incredible, and I really like it. And I've heard other records that he mastered, and my friend Rodent had said, "Hey, you should talk to this guy. He masters, and he might be interested in mastering your record." So I was very excited that he was available to do that, and that was very hands off. It was just I sent it to him. He sent me back when he was done, and I liked it. So yeah, this is great. The video was more work. That was so I wrote an entire kind of when I think back on it, I almost feel so. The video was animated by this woman, Elise Tabat, and she's from Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't checked out her Instagram page, Send Text Image, it's a great page. Her art is just very. She just has this very distinct style, and it permeates everything that she does. And so I had seen actually, Bana Apar. Bana and Rodent had met her when they were in Lebanon. And when they came back, I think it might have been Rodent actually that said, "Hey, you should check out this woman's art. I think you would like it." And so I started following her on Instagram and really liked her art. And after I had finished the record, this is before it was going to come out on vinyl or anything, it was just done. And I just like making videos. So I thought, I'm going to script this video idea and send it to some animators and see if I can find someone who's crazy enough to try and animate this piece of music. So I actually have written out this whole. I should look for it. I had written out this whole. It's a script for the video, like scene by scene, moment by moment throughout the entire record, not just the first track.
Oh, wow.
And, this just shows how little I know about animation. In my mind, I'd already seen what Elise was doing and I really liked it. And I felt like stylistically it fit the music really well. I love how minimal but how high, I don't know what the word would be. The colors they're always on a black background, but they're always very bright. But then somehow muted. It's hard to describe. It's like she puts really bright colors down on a black background in a way that makes them feel set into it in a way. It's hard to describe.
I see what you're saying, though. I'm thinking back on the video. Yeah, it's
kind of bright and muted simultaneously, which I love, and it kind of just, for me, feels like what the music means to me. It's sort of like the way you remember things. They're bright and muted simultaneously, and you never remember anything exactly how it actually happened. You always have this sort of you've always sort of recreated it in a way that fits your I don't know, your hopes or your dreams or your feelings. And so it ends up being muted but bright simultaneously. And that's what her art was. And so I scripted this whole thing for the whole album, which would end up being 30 minutes of animation. And I'm just ignorant enough to go ahead and send it to an animator and say, "Hey, can you do this?" And initially she said she would do the whole album, but then after we did the first track, it took so long to do the first track. She kind of came back to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if I have enough time to do the whole album." And I said, "Yeah, that's the sane choice. Obviously, I didn't realize it would be this much work to get it, because I just had such specific things, and I was asking her to make very specific animation events almost happen with the music that was happening." And so it was a lot of back and forth. And then, she's in Lebanon, and, so there's a bit of a language barrier, though. She speaks great English. So really it's probably more the barrier of just time and communication. And then, Lebanon has rolling blackouts. They have terrible internet connections. So every time she would try and send me a version of the video, half of it would get lost, or the upload wouldn't complete. just because the internet service there is so terrible. And I mean, she was, for part of the time, at least, in Beirut, the major city in Lebanon, and still having these problems. So it was a pretty big struggle to get that video finished, largely because of the technological challenges of operating out of Lebanon. But she did it, and I'm just really thrilled. I feel like she just really nailed it, and it's just such a beautiful piece of animation.
Yeah, it really, I don't know, it flows with the song, and I feel like that, like, I don't know, the way you described her art, and then kind of like it kind of does describe the album as well. They really do go hand in hand, as kind of like bright yet muted. When you were writing that script, do you had her in mind already? Were you kind of writing in her voice in your head?
Yeah, I was really hoping that she would say yes. So if she hadn't have said no, I didn't really have anyone else, honestly. I mean, I probably would have tried to find some other animators, but yeah. And there was no reason really for her to say no. So I had, already kind of talked to her a little bit and told her I really liked her work and that I might send her something, potentially for animation in the future. And she said, yeah, do it. So I felt like she would say yes. It would just be more along the lines of, would she have time? And then obviously we discovered that my goal of a full 30-minute animation, I think if I would have been willing to hire her full time for a year or something, I think I probably could have done it.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, like, even because I've had similar, like, what's the word? Like, just moments of like, just
great ambition,
ignorance. Yeah. Or great. Yeah. Well, and I think to succeed in a lot of stuff that we do within our, like, world that we occupy, like the music world and stuff, is you have to have a lot of ambition. And I think there's got to be a level of, like, self-delusion or something like that,
totally,
that keeps you
a level
going,
of just total, like, blind faith, ignorance, all those things. Yeah, for sure.
It's so funny too. Like, we know the time that it takes to build even just one track, a 4-minute track, and so to maybe somebody who doesn't make music, a 4-minute track could be made, can't you make that in a couple hours? It's just funny that even though we have our own version of, like, what people don't understand about, like, how much time it takes, especially you with even making, like, a module or something, you still thought that maybe it wouldn't take that long for the animator to do the thing. Like, I do the same type of stuff too. It's just funny that it's just like, but then it's like one of those, like, I'm sure, like, once she told you how long it would take, you were kind of like, well, yeah, duh, of course it was going to take,
Absolutely. It made perfect sense.
I love that. So I want to actually, when you mentioned earlier, also you were getting a lot of responses from your friends about this record when you were sending it to them. They had a lot of questions. I instantly started going to, like, questions when I'm, listening to this. I want to just start with some just observations. I think one thing I really love about this album, and I noticed on the Bandcamp, that the last track is the entire album, like, seamlessly, right? So you added an extra track that's...
Yeah, I did that for the old Cool Echoes release too. I think for that one I actually did A and B because it was a tape. I guess this one is an LP, so it could have been A and B. But yeah, I like to do that. Just sometimes when I'm listening to music, if I've downloaded it and I just want to play it, I don't want to have to, like, pick the different tracks. I just want to turn it on and listen to it from start to finish. So I always include it like that. Yeah.
I've done that with a couple of my last albums as well, for the same reason. And I don't know, I think especially with synth music, it's just, I like an album that kind of sounds like it is one piece that has its different acts or movements, and that this feels very much like that. Like, this album has a voice, like it has a what's the word I'm looking for? A cohesion between all the tracks and a thematic feel to it. And I want to ask about that specifically. And then also I noticed, like, your Instagram name was Breakin is a memory forever. And then you release the album, and now you're Tony on I'm curious, like, I was thinking to myself, I was like, if that was an accident, that was really great promo for his record. That's the long game. But I'm just wondering what I figured that wasn't the case. But
no,
I'm just curious, what does that mean to you? What is, it seems like an important phrase to you.
Yeah, it is. It's actually a line from a movie, and it's kind of, so I mean, I'm kind of reluctant to tell people where it came from, because the film is actually kind of corny. I mean, it's a film I love, and it means a lot to me, but it's kind of corny. It's kind of about how, especially in the past, certain things would just become no longer something people thought about anymore. And so the comment actually is, this tough guy, he sees these kids breakdancing, and he, goes up to them and kicks their boombox over, says, breaking is a memory. As in, this shit isn't cool anymore. Why the fuck are you still doing it? Get off of my beach. You know what I mean? He just like, it's just this moment of like, I mean, these kids are clearly really into breakdancing. Like, they're feeling it. It's like something that they're passionate about. They love it. They do it. They are into it enough that they pack up a boombox and go down to the boardwalk and dance. But, to this guy, it's like, it's not cool anymore. It's off trend. You shouldn't be doing this anymore. We've moved on from that. And so it's kind of about this way that people used to kind of jettison everything. Everything was, even like this whole world that we met through modular synthesizers. At one point, they were the cutting edge. And then there was this point where they were completely jettisoned. Nobody wanted modular synthesizers anymore. They were packed away. Colleges that had them in their music departments put them in boxes and shoved them into the corner of storage rooms. Artists that were previously using modular had moved on to digital, Synclaviers, Yamaha DX7s, whatever. Same with analog synths in general. That's like how our culture used to be. Like, we used to just move on from things. That's a memory. We don't even need that anymore. But today, we've reached this strange point where we have so much documented through the internet that nothing really ever goes away anymore. I mean, you see it time and time again. I mean, there is a total resurgence of breakdancing. I mean, breakdancing has like its own like competitive circuit now. There are literally people who make a living breakdancing. So what was once totally off trend and laughed at is now a legitimate pastime. Same with analog synths, modular synths, anything. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is just that feeling of when there's something that means a lot to you, but it means nothing to a lot of other people, almost to a point of it means even less than nothing. It potentially like offends them, which is just a strange feeling to know that something you're so into is just so off-putting to someone else, which again kind of tracks with the worlds that we run in with modular synthesizers. For so long, the most common question was, can you make music with that though? Like, well, I thought that's what I was doing, but I guess not. So it's kind of like taps into that as well. Just this whole idea of just thinking about that scene and like the look of disappointment on the breakdancer's face, because he's thinking he's doing something really great and that it's really beautiful and he's contributing goodness to the world. But this guy rolls up and tells him it's a joke, get out of here.
Do they put the boombacks back up and keep going, or do they take heed his warning of uncoolness and kind of ruminate on it for a while?
I don't know. It's a fleeting scene in the film. It's just one of those phrases that just stuck with me all these years. Like the film's from the 80s. So, I mean, I still remember the scene so like vividly. And so again, I guess maybe it's about, coming back to the idea of memory too. And just the way that certain phrases, sounds, pictures, images can just trigger like a whole era for you. You could hear the sound of like, their first the first four notes of Madonna's Borderline, and suddenly like a whole era of your life can just come rushing back in. You start thinking about the roller rink. You start thinking about that first time you tried to roller skate backwards because you were trying to like talk to a girl while she was skating forward. Just strange things just start flooding back in from like four notes in the intro of a song. So it's kind of about that too, I guess.
I think you just kind of you just put into words for me, one of my favorite things about aging is the older you get, the more of a past you have to have these chunks of time unlocked, and for me, they seem to go in about 4 years, which makes sense. 4 years high school, 4 years college,
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there's stuff that if I hear, I'm instantly back in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or I'm instantly back in Roslyn, Washington when Northern Exposure was being filmed or whatever. And I guess it's not really cool to say, but like I am a sucker for nostalgia. Like I love that feeling. Like if I hear Garth Brooks' Shameless, I'm back in the Tacoma Dome in fourth grade or third grade, and it feels good,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Me neither. I just feel like a lot of people like kind of looked, I don't know. I think Seattle has something about this too, where you like, but I feel like it's kind of in general, or maybe not so much anymore, but like you can't be too much of an enthusiast about anything because sycophants aren't cool, right? And nobody wants a sycophant. But like I really like admiring things, and I like getting into things and understanding things, and when I do, I want to celebrate that. I definitely want to let the person who made it know how much it's impacting me, but I want to share it with other people. And I don't know, like music reviews. I tried to write music reviews for a little magazine here in Seattle for a while, and I wouldn't write a review of something I didn't like because I didn't want to. Just like could make somebody not listen to it who could have otherwise listened to it and liked it.
Yeah, potentially.
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Rant.
I know it does get a bad name. Yeah, I can't lie. I mean, I can appreciate it, but I also think that there's something for like, I mean, in some ways, I feel like it can inform your current moment too. Yeah, I don't know. I know we're for some reason we're not supposed to like it. I don't fully understand why, but for some reason we're not supposed to like it, and yet most of us do. It's like this guilty pleasure of sorts.
Yeah. It's almost like nostalgia is a memory, Like that's that, people who get on us are that guy who kicked over the beat, the
Yeah, that's true. There you go. That is it in a nutshell, right there. Right. I'm definitely not. I'm not kicking over anybody's boombox. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and just the way you describe this, like, I don't know. I like from all the conversations I've had with you, especially about like you making music, it seems like you take it seriously, and you don't just make sounds. You try to like bring out into the world something that you have inside of you that is a feeling or whatever, and I do the same thing, and I think that can translate to the listener and make for a better listening experience. Like your album, it kind of has like that new and old sound that makes it almost like timeless in a way. Like, okay, it could have been made now, but this could have been made, 20 years ago. I can't really tell,
Yeah.
And I think there's something really valuable about that. But I think that comes from your deep, you really do care about what you do, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, well, I do at times just make sounds, and I do at times just goof off or just make music for purely the act of making music. I think when I decide to release something, though, I want it to be maybe a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Arranged or deliberate, I guess. I want it to provide like a service almost to those that might take time to listen to it. Because I really do feel like honored that somebody would even take the time to play the music. There's so much music in the world. and that somebody's taken the time to listen to the record. And wow, if they play it more than once, that's even more incredible. Like you get somebody who actually sits with it 2 or 3 or 4 times to where they really start to really deeply understand it. And yeah, I mean, that's like, I can't express how much I appreciate that. So I try to present something that would provide something for the listener, something that would be of service to them. And then, when I'm just kicking around in my studio, making noise, I'm not going to release that because that's just me having fun. And I don't want to waste their time.
Now, okay, that makes me think of like, I'm curious about your process then. Like, if you go into your studio with the intent of messing around, like, I guess, when you write stuff to like when it ends up on a release, are those tracks born out of a session that you were going in with that intent in mind?
Sort of. So generally what I do is try to, and I mean, again, this is all just since about 2019, because like I said, there was about well over a decade where I didn't even record anything. I think for a period of time, I didn't even have a way to record stuff. And so around 2019, I broken my foot and I was kind of laid up, and I started having, time in the evenings. So I started playing music more. And then I started recording stuff. And like I said, I recorded those 60 pieces of music, that most of which were trash. So I think what happens is if I feel really excited about something, I'm going to go ahead and hit record. And I'm not a person that can just do it start to finish in one afternoon or evening. So what happens is I'll hit record, and I might even expand on that a little bit. I might track another channel. I might come up with a part that accompanies it. But then midnight comes, or 1 a.m., whatever. You get a little foggy, go to bed. And then I just don't think about it for a while. And I come back to it like a month later or 2 weeks later and listen to it, but with like fresh ears and a clear head, and just know right away, this is worth pursuing. Or this was fun for that evening, but it's never going to amount to anything. And so then I keep a little folder of, ideas. And once I come back around and check it, if it's worth pursuing, it goes into another folder that's for like something that I'm going to try to flush out and actually arrange into a piece of music.
Okay.
And then the other folder just rots away on a hard drive somewhere.
That's going to be like somebody's going to dig that up in like 40, 50 years after you've passed, and it's going to be a post-mortem release, and you're like, oh, rolling over in your grave.
I'll be rolling. Yeah.
I didn't want.
Yeah. There's no reason.
That.
No reason
these,
for
like,
that.
The families releasing these these unreleased tracks by these great artists. Like, there's probably a reason they didn't release those.
There is, although sometimes I feel like artists don't know what they're doing that's good.
That's true.
Or maybe they just got really sick of it and they couldn't hear the brilliance anymore. There was a new Prince track that came out that I really loved. It's the first single off that EP. Is so good.
Prince was who I had in mind, but I'm
yeah,
also
I bet. I figured.
I think of like B-sides records. A lot of my, favorite bands as a kid would release these B-sides records.
Right.
And I would be like, why did these get cut? These are great songs. So I think you're right. As an artist, you can be too close to your creations to
totally
not really know.
Close. Yeah. Well, and Prince had a lot of control, especially in the later part of his life. He had a lot of control over what was coming out. I think when we were kids, the music industry, the producer, the label had a lot of control over what was coming out. But, he had kind of gotten out from under that. The track I was thinking of is that one, the Born to Die.
Okay.
That track's pretty solid. And he didn't release that. It was found and then released posthumously. I don't think I'm saying that right. But
yeah.
That's an incredible track. I've played it many times.
Yeah, I hadn't had I was thinking of Prince, although I haven't listened to like any of the post. I was just, so I wasn't bagging on the Prince stuff for the listener out there. So I love me some Prince. We're ripping through this, and I still have a bunch of questions. So I want to make this kind of a two-parter if I can. Was this mostly modular, or was this kind of everything? And where do you start on the modular when you go into a studio with intent?
So it's a mix. It's a mix. So for example, that first track, one for the video, is 2 channels of Strega, 1 channel of ARP 2600, and 1 channel of the Roland Jupiter 8. And then I sampled myself playing something else on the ARP 2600. So there's a sample of the 2600 too. And then there's another sample from another film at the very end that's kind of buried in there. And some post-processing with the tape and microsound, morphogene, mimeophone kind of thing. Okay. And sometimes when I say the word sample, I mean, that might mean morphogene, that might mean Ableton Live Simpler. Very rarely it can mean the EMU emulator, but usually it's Ableton Live Simpler or the morphogene. Those two for me are so great for sampling because the Simpler is great because it's just so easy to use, hence the name. And sometimes if you have something and you kind of want to do more than you did originally with it, you can kind of chop it and put it into that and kind of live arrange it or play it in a way that you wouldn't have thought to play, especially with stuff that you're doing on a modular. You might create like a really good sound, but it doesn't go much beyond that initial sound. So drop it in Simpler and you can kind of expand on it. And then the morphogene,
is that a program, or is that a hard piece of hardware?
Oh no, Simpler is it's like the basic sampler that comes with Ableton Live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what's cool about it is when you drop your sound into it, it can do more traditional sample playback. Where it's changing the pitch as you play by changing the sample playback rate. I guess people would say the frequency, but I guess that's technically not what's happening. It's something more complicated than that. But traditional sample playback, where if you were to put a drum loop in, it changes tempo as you play it higher or lower. But then you can also warp it so that it maintains tempo, and you're just changing pitch. So cool stuff like that. And it's just very functional. It's very, very simple, hence the name. So, and then the morphogene, I find it's just great for if something is interesting, but you don't feel like it is jumbled up. And it kind of comes back around to that whole thing of like how you remember things. And like sometimes I'll play a sound on a synth, like a classic synth, like a Jupiter 8, and it's so recognizable. And so it's almost too recognizable. So I would sample it with a morphogene and do more to it to sort of jumble it up the way your memory would, so that it would be, you get a taste of it. You might recognize it, but it doesn't just come off like something that's straight out of the 80s. It's something that's it's sort of been chewed up and digested and regurgitated through 2021 or 2020 or whenever you're recording it. So okay, but back on track with your question. Oh, with intent. Yeah. So, I find everything starts in different ways for me, at least. So like sometimes it's just, I might find a sample that I really like. It could just be someone saying something in a film or an old TV show or like an old radio show or something like that. Or it might just be like a sample from an old song or something. And that might spark like a whole track. And sometimes it's just, you flip everything on and the first thing you play is like, you feel like it's incredible. And it might,
love that. Yeah.
It might be fine. It might not even be that incredible, but because where your energy level is, you just walked into the room, you turned everything on, and the sequence that was already playing on your, the patch that you left 2 days ago, you flip it on, and when you left it 2 days ago, you didn't like it at all, but now you've walked in with a clear head and it's blaring through the monitors, and it's like, whoa, this sounds incredible. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. I've had that happen with a lot of tracks where I'd go back to, like, I have a similar process that you were describing earlier, just kind of going back and checking stuff out that, is this worth pursuing? And sometimes I don't even remember doing it or how I did it. And I never name my tracks. I need to like name them, like what I'm doing. Like, and like, I always have the project name like Rad Beats with 3 Z's or something, you know? So it's just so annoying.
Well, because you already had Rad Beats with 1 Z.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. There's something about that like energy level that can really, and that kind of speaks to what we were talking about being the artist being maybe too close to some things, like
yeah,
you know. So yeah, I was wondering how much multi-tracking there was, because it sounds like super seamless, but it like, I don't know. I'm curious to like know like how much of it was like just one patch that you just performed versus.
So yeah. So for example, on that first track, the main pattern that was performed almost straight through on the ARP 2600, and then 2 channels of Strega kind of performed. There's kind of like a point where it kind of breaks down just a little bit and then comes back. So those were kind of performed like section A, section B, but straight through. And then the JP8 was also played. That was played from start to finish. But they're multi-track. You know, obviously I'm not doing them all at the same time. So I did the ARP 2600 pass, and then I did the 2 Strega passes, and then I did the JP8 pass. And then after that, I would do some more arrangement if needed. So, for example, sometimes you do something when you're playing it, and but it's not dramatic enough. So, you know, maybe you got a little quieter in this passage, and you can tell that was your intent when you listen back to the take, but it's maybe not quite quiet enough. And so I might do some you know, like mixing or comping to accentuate that. Or say you got louder, same thing. You know, sometimes in the moment, what feels loud enough or quiet enough or fast enough or slow enough isn't enough when you go back and you actually listen to it with fresh ears. It's like, yeah, I nudged the tempo there and it went a little faster. That's cool. It doesn't go quite fast enough. You know, I might time stretch or compress to make something more dramatic, larger than life, essentially, is what I'm always trying to get. Something that just feels, like I said, it should feel like a memory, because in your memory, things are usually rosier and more beautiful or uglier and more terrifying than they really were. And so if you're trying to create that, or at least I am when I'm trying to finish a piece of music.
Yeah. So it sounds like your process is whatever serves the piece as far as method.
Yeah, sure.
I totally like. I've had a lot of conversations with people who like to, you know, get one patch and have it a stereo track and have that be the track. And then, you know, some people want to do one piece at a time. And I think there's no right answer, really. It's just whatever serves the song, really.
Yeah. And the benefit of, if you're a person that can do something straight through a full patch live, the benefit of that is when you go to perform it, obviously, if you want to do a live set, if you've taken good notes, you could potentially recreate that. For everything on this record, most of it's tuned by ear. Like all the patterns are written with a 0 control, tuned by ear. You know, the potential for recreating that note for note using the original instruments is, I mean, that's just going to be an undertaking of epic proportions. One that I, you know, couldn't afford to hire musicians for. It would take a lot of people and a lot of very patience, really. So yeah, I think there's advantages to that method as well. When you go to try to perform something live, you're going to have a path to that, a much more clear path.
Well, so this is leading me to a question that I'm kind of assuming something, so I want to see if I'm right. I'm probably not, because, you know, with the assumption thing. But I saw in that Reverb video that you did recently, where you were like hanging out with a guy from Reverb talking about stuff, your setup had 2 morphogenes in it. Is this typical, or do you have 2 morphogenes so you can play some of this stuff live?
Yeah, so the reason that came about is so Fess, who hosts the Reverb Patchworks series, he says, what I really like you to do is maybe a demonstration of one of the patches you used for one of the tracks on the record. And it's just, like I said, I don't take very good notes. And like when I pull up a session, it's not like each channel's named like for what it is, like shared system or Strega or Jupiter 8. It's just numbers. It's like, like one track. So there's no notes. And I'm trying to get better at that. But it's hard. It's hard work, especially if you're in that state of flow and like creating and enjoying making music. You're probably not thinking that far ahead.
It never
like, I should meticulously document this patch so I can recreate it later. And that combined with it having been almost a year and a half ago, didn't really have much to show him in that matter. So then it started making me think, hey, maybe I need to perform this stuff live at some point. I got to figure out a way to do that. And so that led me down this path of trying to build a system that would let me do these sort of live echo jams of my own music. And initially I was very ambitious, going back to that, story about the half-hour animation with Elise. So initially I was going to break each track into subgroups. The tracks are all pretty simple. I don't have anything with like 32 channels or something. It's all like between 3 and 8 channels. But I was figuring like make 3 to 4 subgroups for each track. And then, stick with that sort of echo jam mentality of trying to find like the best pieces from each track. Like what's something that you wouldn't mind hearing looped for a while, for 2 or 3 minutes. But I was going to do it where I was going to capture 2 or 3 loops from each track, but subgroup them. So I'd have like high frequency loops, stuff like in that first track, it would be the 2 channels of Strega, which are higher octaves. And then I would have lower octaves, which would be the, in that track is the ARP. And then I'd have like a drone, which is the JP8. So I had kind of built this system with 4 morphogenes, and I had tried kind of, I guess, stems of sorts, like loop-based stems. So I cut these loops, but it was just so much to manage. It was so hard to do that.
Were you like putting them in the different splices?
Each morphogene would kind of be assigned a subgroup. So like one morphogene would be my low frequency stuff, one would be my high, one would be my mid or whatever. And then the fourth one could be for stuff maybe that wasn't even in the track originally, like maybe finding some other samples to launch over top of those. And it just, and then I had this idea of being able to
morphogene.
It was an insane system. And I had this other idea of like, well, it'd be really great because then if, say I picked off like 3 patterns and I could like start jumbling up the patterns. So pattern A1 over pattern B3 and pattern C1, or, like just really start. And in my mind, this presented all these incredible opportunities for kind of reimagining the music. But the net effect was that it felt too jumbled and it felt too, like the identity of the music was kind of lost. And that combined with just managing 4 morphogenes, which is just way too much for any normal human being. I'm sure Richard Devine's listening, or probably not listening. Maybe he is. I don't know. But if he was, he'd probably say 4 morphogenes, that's nothing. I run 6. I know Rodent has like at least 3. I think I just kind of realized this is too much. So I got rid of 1, 3 was still too much. So then I came down to this idea of, instead of trying to break it out into these like channels, these stems, if you will, I would just kind of custom fit these loops. And so I went back to the sessions and like I would pick a portion that I really wanted to loop, but I'm not going to just take it straight off like the master, for example. I'm going back to the session. So I might, mute some of the channels and kind of focus on just these two. And then I might get rid of, if I was running any sort of echo or something like that, I might get rid of that. And I kind of created these custom loops. At the time that I did the reverb interview, I really only had one done, and it wasn't the best. It had to do. I mean, they wanted to do the interview, and I only had that one kind of partially operational one. So I'm not super excited about how that sounded, but it did prompt me to finish it, and I've done 4 more now. I'm getting better at it. And so it's really about picking those spots that you want to loop, and then what can you pull away from the original recording to kind of unearth something that maybe shines a little more than it did on the record. And that might be exciting. If someone's heard the record before, they might recognize bits of it. If they've never heard the record before, if they liked the show and then they went to home and listened to the record, it might be kind of a cool effect too, because they would get that sort of feeling that they'd heard it before, but it wasn't exactly like what they had just heard. It'd be almost like feel a little bit distant.
Yeah. I think that's such a great solution to approaching a live performance when you're trying to also promote a record, or just stay in that headspace or explore that headspace more. I've done that less involved, but now I'm thinking like I'm probably going to try what you just said. But I'd just take I had an album a few years ago where most of it was just stereo tracks, very simple patches, very short. I just loaded those into a sampler, and then I would like process those I'd kind of like improv those through effects and just cutting it up on.
For sure. I've seen some other artists do that. I've seen Alessandro Cortini do something to that effect with, he had like a tape player combined with signal processing. I'm pretty sure when I saw Katarina play, it was kind of a combination of loops that she had taken from her own music combined with some live sequencing and a lot of live signal processing. I'm not positive, but it seemed like that's what she was doing.
I think also in this kind of music that we work in, like it's one thing for a band to go out there and play the song just like the record, but if you're up there with a machine with wires and you play it just like the record, there could be people in the audience that are like, are they just playing the record and standing on stage right now?
Yeah. It's like the equivalent of the unloaded Marshall cabinets.
Yeah, right. Just cardboard boxes.
You've just got this system. There's some wires poking out of it, some lights flashing, and you got the CD player underneath. You hit and go.
I had just as far as like specific moments on 2 specific tracks.
Sure.
The 4th track, hold on, I want to see I think it's the 4th one. Something about a forest of phenomena a forest of phenomena. There's like this like really cool like wavering lead line. Is that from Strega? Because it kind of is like the Strega voice with the tones. Like
it's like it's the one that comes. The music kind of calms down, and it's just like the bass and that for like in between the more like louder part. That's the Strega.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And then were you playing live bass on some of this?
Yeah.
Track? Okay.
Yeah. A lot of stuff is just played freehand. Don't usually. If I want something to be strict, I would pattern program it with a zero control or a René. Every once in a while, if I can't figure out a chord, I'll record MIDI and then fuss about with it. But generally, I just play it.
Okay, yeah, and I think that translates as well, because there's always, I think it's always a challenge to have your humanity shine through with electronic music. And I think that's a good way to do that.
There's that push and pull between the grid and the human.
Yeah, right. Well, man, this has already been an hour. I don't know. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could keep going all day about this, but I just want to make sure, have we covered everything about this album? And is there anything that you want to scream from the modular mountaintops?
No, I don't think so. I made some T-shirts. They're kind of fun. So if you don't like vinyl, you can get the shirt and you get a download with it.
I like that.
The shirts look like they were pulled out of a box from like a Overage's warehouse or something. Like they don't look new. I'm not sure. It's funny because I've always wanted to do Make Noise shirts that look like this, but they never fly because there's always concern that they look too old, faded. Mm-hmm. Basically, these days they do like 3 or 4 hits with ink. So it's like really like thick and shines through. I had them just do 1 hit with the ink. And it's also a 3-color, which isn't very common these days either, because it costs more to do the 3 colors. And it's cool when you lay those colors over each other, especially with the thin hits, they kind of fade through each other a little bit. Oh, yeah. Kind of like a look you just don't see as much these days. So I think they're a really cool shirt. What else? I don't have anything else to scream. I don't know. If you're listening to this and you're booking shows, get in touch. Oh, I'm going to try to play some shows, but I don't have any idea how you go about that. So
I have an idea. I'll talk to you after this, so I don't put you on the spot on a recording. But I do have an idea for that. Cool. I think I was going to maybe ask about if there's anything new from Make Noise that you could talk about, but I feel like that would just be such a random thing to bring up in this lovely conversation. I think I want to leave that on the floor.
Sure. Yeah. That's fine. I mean, know that we are still operating. It's just things have just gotten, it takes longer to do everything. So anything that I'm working on feels like it's ancient to me, even though nobody knows about it.
Oh, this is okay. In the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, me being an enthusiast and loving things and liking to tell people who made something that I love how much I love it. And I know you've probably heard this so many times, but I truly think that the Morphogene is maybe one of the greatest pieces of musical technology ever invented. So thank you for that wonderful gift.
Thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, I love the Morphogene. I used it all over this record. So it's just, it's a really fun device. I agree.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thanks for joining me for my special 200th. I really appreciate it.
That's a hell of a landmark. Seriously, Tim. That's a lot of episodes.
Thanks. It's been fun. I'm just glad that I still like doing it. So
it surprises you sometimes. You're like, wow, I did this for 4 years and I'm still doing it. Huh.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that just in context of talking to you. I know we're just about to wrap it up, but that, you obviously still feel that way about Make Noise, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah.
You still have that zest and like creative spirit for that, Yeah,
absolutely. And, as you probably well know from doing the podcast, part of what keeps you going is the energy that you feel from people that enjoy the thing. So when I meet someone and they tell me they really have enjoyed the Morphogene, for example, I mean, that's like a good shot of adrenaline, I guess, or maybe that's the wrong word.
A little dopamine hit.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, well, that's great, because we worked really hard on it. And if it was just forgotten, then you might get a little discouraged. But when you hear people are using the thing and enjoying it and it's bringing joy into their life, it just really gives you like good purpose. Just makes you feel like, oh, it's cool that I'm still here on the planet.
Well, I think everybody.
I'm not just wasting resources here. So yeah, that helps. And so people listening to your show and enjoying it, being that little bright spot in someone's afternoon, it's a good feeling. So that's probably part of why you can still do it after 4 years.
Definitely, yeah. And I just get to have I get to talk to interesting people all the time, one-on-one. Undivided attention conversations, which are rare. So I think that's really special too.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point these days. It is rare. In your 200 episodes, what is the juiciest bit of information you've ever gotten out of somebody? I mean, something they haven't told anybody else, and somehow you heard it first on Podular Modcast.
Well, I had to edit it out. of course.
No.
Well, but it became known later, but it was something that they didn't want known at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I was talking to Earthquaker Devices,
Mm-hmm.
Jamie and Julie, and I was talking to them about how much I loved the Afterneath pedal and how much I wish it was a module. And they both kind of looked at each other and they're like, well, it's about to be, but you have to cut this part out. So that was pretty cool. I think you maybe even dropped some stuff, or I don't know, just getting the Strega before anybody knew about it. I don't know if you told me about that on the show, but that talk about something that makes you feel like I have entered into this world. You know, I felt like I was part of this thing. When you guys asked me to be a part of that, that was just like, it meant so much to me. And it really like capped off the end of that year. I'm like, speaking of nostalgia, like I was getting into Deerhoof at the time, and all these things are kind of wrapped up in my head, and the Strega is in that kind of memory cloud. So that was also very cool.
Nice. Okay. You ready for another question?
Yeah.
All right. What sort of information do you wish guests were more forthcoming with? In other words, do you ever ask questions and you feel like they're giving me some boilerplate bullshit answer here? I want the real details.
Yeah. And I think upon reflection, because I've been thinking a lot about, you know, what I thought the show was going to be and what I wanted it to be and what it actually is. Where's that Venn diagram? You know, what is in that Venn diagram? I think sometimes I ask people about like what got them into music in their childhood, because it's a question that I would want to be asked, because I would have a very nostalgia injected answer. So I always kind of wish that people would go more into detail about, you know, just like how much the one thing meant to them. Like, so, like if there's one thing or a couple things that got them into the thing that is like one of their most forming characteristics, one of their biggest pieces of their identity, like being a musician, you know, what was that seed that was planted, and why do you think that was so strong, and just like a little more personal information, you know? But it's hard to tell people on the spot to, hey, give me a really personal answer. So I just kind of hope that it sparks something in their head, and sometimes it does. But I think sometimes people think I'm just asking like, what was the first song you ever liked? You know, and it's like, I don't want to ask too leading of questions, you know? So it's a hard balance to find.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well, what was the first song?
Well, if I'm going to talk about wanting to really be a musician, I think it would probably have started with Pearl Jam's Even Flow. My dad was DJing a high school dance for my older cousin, and I'm in like fourth or fifth, maybe third grade, very young, and I'm so bored. And then this song comes on, and I'd never heard anything, because I was listening to Roy Orbison, Dwight Yoakam, and Garth Brooks, you know, what my parents were listening to, and then all of a sudden this comes on, and it just broke my head, and that was kind of like what made me really go the way of rock and roll and get into music. So I guess Even Flow by Pearl Jam is the song.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when that song came out. Yeah, that was a heavy one for sure.
It's a ripper.
Yeah. It had that bass line. Kind of what really turned my ear. It's like, it's an interesting bass line.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to come. Those are the two that I had. Let me see if I can get one more. Oh, but this one actually pretty easy. I mean, you've had 200 episodes, some repeat guests, but obviously there's a lot of different guests have been on here, probably well over 100, I would guess. In the future, is there someone that you've really wanted to be on the show but hasn't worked out yet, or you haven't gotten the gumption to ask them to be on the show? And if there is, who is that person?
I've been asked this question a few times, and I think Caitlin Aurelia Smith is somebody I'd really like to chat with, because she was one of the first people that I listened to when I got into modular, like one of the first modular artists I really listened to. She has an interesting story, I think, growing up on Orcas Island, which is one of
right.
the coolest places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not far from here. I think a neighbor of hers had an old bukla in a barn or something, and that's how she got introduced to it. So it's just like, what kind of magical story is that? This magical island with orcas around it, and you find a bukla yeah. So I'd like to talk to her about that. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of all the other wish list people I've kind of talked to, you know.
Cool. That's a great feeling.
Yeah, yeah. I got to like go to Suzanne Ciani's house.
Wow.
Yeah, like me and Ellison from Waveform hung out with her there for like hours.
That's so cool.
I did her dishes, you know. It was so cool. I got to interview Dave for that same weekend. I got to interview Dave Smith in his office, you know.
Right.
So
You're in the area. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. But I guess there are always people like outside of the world that I think are like adjacent. I think like Jad Abumrad from Radiolab. I think he's a synth head. I think he'd be interested to talk, because he's a podcaster as well. I think, you know, it'd be fun to talk about. Duncan Trussell, the comedian. I've been trying forever, and he said yes, and we've scheduled things, but it never has panned out. So I would like to get him on.
He got a shared system from us, I believe.
Oh, really? Yeah, because he lives around there, I think.
He lives in Hendersonville. Yeah, not far from here.
Okay.
I've never met him face to face. I think maybe chatted over email. He had some questions or something. But hey, if I ever do see him around town, I'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah, right on. Thanks.
I'm sure he would be a blast to have on there, though.
Yeah. Well, he's one of the one of the reasons I started this show. I was really depressed. I was going back and forth in my head about whether or not I wanted to do it. And I'm at this construction job that I hated. And to preface this a little bit, he's the guy who introduced me to a lot of the Tibetan Buddhism stuff that I got into.
Oh,
so
okay.
like a little bit more of like the wooier kind of way of thinking. And, you know, I used to be a hard empiricist, and then I'm kind of like more fluid with that now, just kind of open to whatever. But I'm standing there on a ladder, and I'm literally going back and forth in my head. You should do it. No, you shouldn't do it. No, you shouldn't do it. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm listening to one of his podcasts, but I'm not actually listening because I'm in my head. And then all of a sudden he gets my attention back onto his podcast because he goes, "It's like modular synthesis, man." And I'd never heard him talk about modular synthesis before. So I was like, I'm starting a podcast about modular synthesis. And then I booked my first guest like that day. So I think he would be cool to talk to.
I hope he comes on sometime.
Yeah, me too. And then John McIntyre from Tortoise.
Oh, yeah. That guy's pretty legendary around Chicago.
Yeah.
When I lived there, he was a big synth head.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this about him, but like he had an incredible collection of synths back in Chicago. I don't know about today, but back in the day in the 90s, he had stuff that was really cool.
He does modular stuff.
Oh, nice.
Because he drums in the Sea and Cake.
And
I
love Sea and Cake. One of my favorite bands. Yeah.
And I've had Sam Prekop on the show.
I've listened to it.
Super into synth. So, and they play music together. So I think I can work that angle and get.
Yeah. But Sam's records are so good on how much you've listened to his solo electronic stuff. So good. Some of my favorite solo electronic music.
Yeah. That most recent one he released was fantastic. He did one, a long form thing. I think it's called Long Form Meditations as a label that releases like these 1-track albums by a bunch of people. And he did one of those. It's very good.
Oh, I got to find that. I haven't heard that one.
It's on Bandcamp. Okay. Yeah, it's very good.
But not under his account, under...
I'm not sure if it's under him, or I'm pretty sure it's Long Form Meditations is the label. Or it's a series by a label. But if you can't find it, let me know. I'll send you a link. And yeah, he's just so prolific because you see if you follow him on Instagram, every day he's got this crazy huge patch.
I know.
So yeah,
he does. Yeah.
Well, I guess that makes me think like, okay, so you've got to work with Alessandro Cortini. Is there anybody that you like, if you could have anybody reach out and say, "Hey, Tony, I want you to help me design an instrument." Like,
I mean, I have had some artists that I really love reach out, especially since the Strega. The tough thing is a project like Strega it's a massive commitment, and also it has to be something that people will actually understand and want. And so unfortunately, even though I would love to work with some of these artists, I haven't been able to say yes yet, just because the right opportunity hasn't really presented itself. Just because someone wants to, and the cool thing is the artists that have reached out to me, none of them just wanted to like attach their name to something. They came to me with ideas like, hey, I got this thing that I do. And, I do it digitally with Ableton, but I'm thinking maybe I could do this. Or I had someone else who had this kind of elaborate patch that they had developed and wanted to sort of create a module that would basically make that patch possible. And my struggle with that was just like in the one case, it felt like something that was I don't know. I guess I just kind of felt like this is so unique to you, and you've developed this patch, and it's a wonderful patch, but it's kind of your specific thing. Like I don't know how I could take this and create something that would be universally appealing and useful to a large group of modular synthesists. So it's just not the right the right thing hasn't really come up. You also have to really, it's such a relationship, So the cool thing with
Strega
Alessandro,
took years, right?
Yeah. It went from it went from being some big, instrument that probably would have cost $4,000, to whittling down into the core, the essence of the idea. But also Cortini and I were friends before we even started it. So that also helps, I think. Because like I said, it's such a big endeavor that you kind of have to trust the person on a level. The amount of money that you have to throw into something like this, it just, it could get bad fast. And, but with Cortini, it's like, he's already somebody that I'm friends with and trust and know and feel comfortable with. So it was a little easier, I think. Because like I said, these people aren't just wanting to attach their name. It's not like they want to just endorse something or attach their name to it. They're coming with like real ideas. And in some cases, great ideas. It just maybe doesn't work for me or make noise.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Because sure. If you're a fan of their music, you don't know that you're going to be a fan of each other's personalities, So,
yeah, that's a great point, actually. Wow. Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah. So I think having that already established relationship does seem like very important. So, I mean, how cool of a position that is, though, to have to say no.
To have to say no. It's really hard, actually. I felt terrible on, just because I don't know. I almost feel like I feel like I'm almost offending them or something, but I try to like explain to them how much I like their music, because I am a big fan. I mean, I listen to so much music, and I find that, like you, I'm a person. If I like something, I like to let people know that. So it wasn't that hard, and I think they knew that I was already a big fan. So I don't think it was like that awkward, but I still felt kind of bad about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they also know that you have a list of ideas that's constantly growing.
I mean, projects at least. Yeah. I mean, I've got 5 things going on right now. So adding one more to that is just, it has to be the right thing, or it's just not going to, that's the other thing that, am I going to do it justice? This is a cool idea. You're an incredible artist. Am I the person that's right for this? My capabilities are pretty focused and limited. So I'm not like a jack of all trades by a long shot.
Well, you have maybe not all trades, but you have many.
I have, so I don't know. That's generous of you to say that.
Well, you can make a record and you can make a synth. So those are good in my book. So
yeah. To me, they're kind of the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah, actually, that I keep trying. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so you just let me know when you got to go. But that did make me think of another question of just like how similar is that feeling of inspiration and then execution of that inspiration in the studio versus in the workshop?
Well, I think there are some parallels. And, especially when you start talking about how long it takes for something to actually come to fruition. Prior to the pandemic delays with hardware, or I guess with records too, I feel like there is, and I guess in some ways I like prototype music in some ways, because I finish something and I will send it out to some friends whose opinions I value, I guess, or something, or maybe it's that, but also maybe it's just that I know they'll actually listen to it and give me some honest feedback. So I guess maybe that's kind of like prototype. Yeah. Like I say, I really genuinely want to make music that people will want to listen to. I'm not, if I just want to play sounds and make music for myself, I can do that all night long. I don't have to press it on a record and waste, precious vinyl resources to do it. I can just do that by myself. So yeah, I guess I do kind of prototype the music in some ways. And then, yeah, I do think being, doing Make Noise is just, I've developed a level of patience that I don't think I would have had in my 20s. And so I'm extremely patient with finding the right pieces to arrange a piece of music into, the best that I can do. At least it might not be the best possible permutation of that collection of sounds and notes and timbres and tempos, but I try to make it the best that could come from me. So, and I feel like that comes from, doing Make Noise for 15 years. Just, you have to have so much patience. So, yeah.
Well, I see that. I feel like just learning modular has taught me patience.
Absolutely. And I'll add this, speaking of just learning modular, I think, some folks that I've talked to about this have been really surprised how much I like Ableton Live. And because I think it's great. I love it. I really enjoy using it. And one of the things that I think allowed me to like Ableton Live is my knowledge of modular, because so much about what makes Ableton Live really interesting and useful and fun, more so than like just using GarageBand or something, is the way that it can be almost patch programmed. You can really create influence from one channel to the next, and there can be a lot of modulations that can happen even after you've modulated the modulation of the modular. You record that modulated modulation, and then you can further modulate it in Ableton Live. So it's a lot, but and all of that kind of came while I was out of making music. So when I got back to it, the folks at Ableton had we had done a trade. They wanted some synthesizers, like a Zero Coast, I think, and some other stuff. And they had, traded for a Ableton license, and I didn't even use it for the longest time. And when I finally came back, I just blew my mind. I thought, wow, like they really did something with this.
Yeah, I haven't used it in a long time, but when I did, it's like an instrument in itself.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing. And then the CV Tools integration. I don't use much from it. I use the clock mostly, but it's so useful. It just having that really tight clock that you can send out to, like, I send it to my Tempe, and that feeds everything. It'll feed the arpeggiator on an old synth, or the sequencers, the Rene, the Zero Control, all the stuff. So having that connection, it's a simple one, but that didn't used to exist. So having that is a real blessing. It just makes things come together so much smoother and more quickly.
Yeah. I actually have got some insight into what you were mentioning about Make Noise, like being in the instrument manufacturing business, teaching you patience as well. It's like I learned a little patience from the patching of modular, which actually made me better at desktop synthesizers. And then, working with After Later, Lenny helped me design. He mostly designed this silly module that we released. And I was so excited that I just wanted to get it out the door. And now that I've got one under my belt and I work there and I see how this works and how it's worth waiting in certain ways, like I'm working on another design, which is going to be actually very useful. It's not going to be a joke module, and I'm very, very excited about it. But I'm not trying to push it out the door. Like, I'm really wanting to sit back and make sure it is what I want it to be.
Right.
And work the way that, so yeah. And I feel like that translates to life. I hope anyways.
Yeah. No, yeah. So you're there now. You're like, okay, wait, I did it. Now I got to do it better. That takes some time. Yeah. No, that's a great place to be. And it's painful waiting, but I don't know. I think you'll be happy. I think you'll be happy you waited.
If it turns out the way, because I just got the first functioning prototype, and I got it last week, and now 4 days later, it's in my head a totally different thing, and it's like I've already got it all written out. And me and Lenny have had a few meetings about it, and I feel like if it works the way that I think it can now, it should be done, but I still got to get that back and play with it, and who knows what's going to happen after that. So
I know
it's a fun process.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's exciting, challenging, exciting, all the good things.
All right, I'm gonna let you have the rest of your day.
Yeah,
you've already been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good to chat.
All right, that is our show. Thank you so much to Tony Rolando for coming back to Podular Modcast for the third time. I just love that conversation. It's going back and listening to it again in the editing process was a real treat, and I just feel very lucky to be in a position where I have now had 3+ hours of one-on-one conversation with him. As I stated earlier in the episode, that's just one of my favorite parts of doing this show is getting to have these in-depth conversations one-on-one with all the great minds of the synthesizer world. Also, thank you to you for listening. If this is your first time coming to Podular Modcast, welcome. I hope you stick around. If you've been here for a while, thanks for that. I also hope you still stick around. If you want to help support the show, you can do that a number of ways, one of which is over at patreon.com/Podular Modcast. That is the beating heart of Podular Modcast. So that's how it goes. That's how it continues to go. That wasn't very good, but I'm tired of re-recording my outro because, here I am explaining myself again. Still working on that one. Thank you to Nathan Moody over at obsidiansound.net if you want to save 10% off of your first mastering project from Nathan. Mention that you heard about him here on PodMod. Also, thank you to Patchworks. I love Patchworks. Tom, Cindy, and the whole crew. They're just the best. I got to see a lot of them recently. It's just, it's such a great family we have here in the Pacific Northwest. And if you want to check them out, head over to patchwerks.com. Also, thank you to Afterlater Audio for your continued support of the show. I love working with and for Afterlater Audio. We're developing some cool stuff. I cannot wait for all y'all to see what we've got in store for you. But you can head over to afterlateraudio.com to see what's going on currently. Don't forget, we have copies, but limited few copies of the Podular Modcast and Friends Baby Blue vinyl over at mysterycircles.bandcamp.com. All proceeds go to Mary's Place, an organization helping women, children, and families find their way out of houselessness. So you're doing a good thing by supporting this small label, all of us independent artists, and a charity. I feel like I'm overwhelming you with information, so links to everything that I've mentioned in this outro will be present in the show description, including links to Tony's new album, Breakin is a Memory. I'm telling you, it is one for the books. If you think he's good at module making, well, you should check out his music, because I think he's just as good at making that. Once again, thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. This week's secret word, and for those of you new to the show, the secret word is what you put on the Instagram post as a comment when I, announce this episode on Instagram, and it's kind of a little club. It shows that you're in the know, and the secret word is, actually it's a phrase, ropin' the wind. Ropin' with like an apostrophe, no G, ropin' the wind. And for extra credit, you can tell me what that is in reference to without looking it up. If you look it up, it doesn't count. And there's no way I'll know that you looked it up, but you will. And that will sit in your heart forever. Ropin' the wind. Until next week.